everybody, welcome back to Smoky Mountain Dogs. This will be part 2 in a multi-series episode on how to build a food trailer. First thing you're going to want to do when you get it home is most trailers are lined with the inside with 3/8 inch or 1/4 inch plywood. It'll be lined on all the walls. The ceiling may be finished with Luan plywood or may not be finished. Just be your metal trusses going across the top. Who knows? But when I got home, first thing I did was I marked these panels inside the trailer. I took a Sharpie marker and I printed front left top, front left bottom, rear left top, rear left bottom. Because when I screw these out, I want to make sure I know exactly where they go back into the trailer because they're specialty cut. There's some vent holes and things like that that are cut in place. And I just wanted to make them back in the same place they came from. This plywood is screwed in with these self-tapping, self-drilling flathead 1-inch screws. There's about 1,000,000 of them. Get your cordless drill driver, put on your favorite tunes, get in your trailer, and just take out all this plywood and just stack it up. Once you take out all that plywood, you're going to be left with a skeleton in there of either 1 by 1.5 tubing or whatever they designed your trailer with. They try to keep it as light as possible. You're going to be left with a shell like this with your indigo blue outside like this. So it's going to look kind of like this when you look inside the trailer. And there's going to be a bunch of 12-volt wiring that's going to be across the top and then down the sides and down some of the corners. That 12-volt lighting is for your clearance lights, brake lights, all that stuff that pertains to your trailer. So just make sure you keep an eye on it. Make sure you keep it out of your way. For later, you're really going to need to keep it out of your way when you get to put this thing all back together again. So once I had it down to bare studs like this, it was time for me to start working on my concession window opening. So what I did was I went down to Home Depot or Lowe's, I believe, and I bought some 1x1 tubing because they didn't have 1 by 1.5 tubing at the Home Depot or Lowe's. Now you could go down and you could order this probably at any of your specialty steel stores, and you can order this 1 inch by 1.5 inch tubing if you want to keep it all matching in there. But I should have maybe, but I didn't. Was it right? Probably not. Was it wrong? Probably. But I'm doing it this way. So I got 2 6-foot sticks of this 1x1 from the Home Depot or Lowe's, and I came back home and I measured my concession window, which was 60 inches by 36 inches. So it left me with about 6 inches of play on each side of this 1x1 that I purchased. So what I did was I laid my concession window on my garage floor. I measured it out like 85 times because this is pretty important, you know what I mean, if you want the window to work correctly. So I measured it out 25 different times. Once I got it measured out, I went inside my trailer and I measured out inside my trailer on these 1 by 1.5 inch studs exactly where I wanted my concession window. And once I had this measured out, I knew I was going to have to cut 4 of these out, a total of 4 of them on the sides. I got my cutoff wheel, which I had to buy a bigger cutoff wheel, and I went ahead and made the cuts. Zoop, zoop, zoop. So essentially I had 4 36-inch tubes, just like this, that popped out of the trailer. Now keep in mind, I did not cut through my exterior shell, this polycore. I have not cut through it yet. On some YouTube videos, you're going to see them. They measure the outside of the trailer and they just go to town, whack, whack, whack. And this is an important cut for me, and I wanted to make sure it was right. So I removed those 4 studs from inside, this 4 36-inch studs, or whatever the measurement came out. I think it was 38. I took these out, and what I did was I built a frame on my garage floor where I welded a complete frame in, just like this. The 1 inch by 1 inch tube is on the bottom, and I used my spares that I cut out for each side, and I essentially had a frame. Now I took that frame and I laid it over my concession window that was on my garage floor, and I double checked. I measured from corner to corner. I made sure everything was square. I made sure it fit really good. Then I went inside my trailer and I held that up inside the inside of my trailer, and I slipped it in. I went ahead and I welded it into the bottom, all 4 of those supports. I welded in three sides. I was able to weld because remember, I still have my exterior shell on there. I haven't cut it yet. No. So once I had that all welded in, then I carried my concession window inside the trailer. I set it on the supports and I made sure it was going to fit. Once I made sure that was going to fit, then I took my large cutoff wheel and I used my frame that was inside that trailer as a guide for when I cut that 36-inch by 60-inch hole out. So once I had that hole out, I felt really good. Weather sealed the outside of the concession window. I slipped my concession window in. I used some more of those metal self-tapping screws that came with my concession window. They were black, so they matched the black trim around my concession window, and I screwed that thing in, caulked the outside of it real good, made sure it wasn't going to leak. And that's the way I did it. Was it the right way? I don't know. Was it the wrong way? Probably, but that's the way I did it. Common sense, practicality. I wanted to make sure when I cut that hole, it was perfect. I didn't want to have to go back and replace the whole side of my trailer because I made a wrong cut. Now, once I had that concession window in and I had the inside completely stripped out, all my welding was done, my grinding was done. You make sure you clean up your welds really good. You got a flat disc or you got the regular grinder disc. Make sure you clean those welds up flat, make them look pretty. I used the $99 Harbor Freight welder. I don't know how to weld, no idea how to weld, but I was able to do it, stick them together, and they're nice and tight in there and strong. The next thing I did was I went on Amazon and I bought some of this. I believe they call it nickel floor. I had my choice of a nickel floor or a diamond plate plastic floor or vinyl floor. I went with the nickel floor. Basically, it came in a roll 7 feet by 17 feet. And I kind of like the nickel because when I measured out, I didn't want to just throw the whole thing inside the trailer and let it flap up the walls and get all aggravated. So I measured the width of my trailer inside from wall to wall first, from stud to stud. And then I laid it out on my driveway here in the sun a little bit, and it got a little bit warm. And when I measured, I was able to look at these nickels, and I was like, oh, the measurement comes right in the middle of that nickel. So I was able to cut straight down that thing without measuring, popping a chalk line or anything. And once I put it inside the trailer, be very careful with the glue that you use. Make sure it's really, really, really thin. I got my glue thick in some places, and it was kind of squishy. So make sure your glue is really thin when you put that down. So once I had the floor down, it was time to insulate. I used a white foam 1-inch foam board. I don't know, it's an R1, 2, 3, 4 something. Uh, I'm sure it's got a little bit of a insulation factor to it. Doesn't say this is just a piece of scrap. So essentially, I've got my insulation. I put it between every single stud inside the trailer, on the sides, on the roof. So now we're looking something like this. We've got your studs, we got your insulation, and your polycore exterior trailer. So it's going to look something like that. Next thing I did was I went ahead and I ran my wiring, and we are going to discuss wiring in a future, probably next week's episode. So I'm not going to get in too much detail on the wiring, but I ran all my wiring. I knew where my outlets were going to go and whatnot. So that was all done. It's all hanging up here. It's all looking sloppy. I went down and I got some 1x3 boards. And what I did was I put the 1x3 board on the tubular steel that was inside. I used a 1-inch self-tapping screw to put this 1-inch onto the tubing. So it kind of looks, now we're kind of looking like this. I did not run this 1x3 all the way to the ceiling. I left a gap about like this. You'll never guess what this gap is great for. It's great for all your wiring, to hide all your wiring. You're probably thinking to yourself, why in the world is he building this wall out so much? Well, the reason I'm building this wall out so much is I want to keep my electrical boxes, my wiring, and everything inside the walls. I want it to look very neat. Some trailers you'll see, they'll have the conduit coming down the walls. You'll have the boxes on the outside, which stick out a couple of inches and take up space. The particular box that I purchased off of Amazon is a shallow 2-inch box, and it has a large opening over here. So all your wiring connectors and things like that can slide to the side, and you have plenty of room. I'll go over these boxes in more detail next week and how I did my electrical. So once I had my 1x3 studs lining the walls around the window and everything like that, it was time to go ahead and put my plywood back in that I had removed when I first started. So check this out. I did a little bit of a template, the same size as my box. And I put a hole in it just in case I ever wanted to use this template at a later date. Whenever I put my fiberglass walls in, I could run my electrical cord here, set it on the wall, and I could just cut it straight out. But this is the size of my outlet box. So when I went back to put my plywood in, I knew exactly where my outlets were going to go. So I scribed this square on that plywood, and lo and behold, when I put the plywood back on my walls, screwed everything in. And by the way, when you go to screw that plywood onto this 1x3 in there, you know how hard it is finding a 3/4 inch or 1 inch screw? It's difficult. And then when you do find them, they're not a good quality. They strip out the wood. You get aggravated. You end up throwing a whole pile of them outside your trailer on the ground. I finally found a decent 1 inch screw on Amazon. Again, I think I might have 2 subscribers now. Nobody supports me or gives me anything, but when I find something decent, I'm going to share it with everybody. These are Torx head. They're 1 inch. They're made for wood. They grabbed really good, and you want them to countersink the head just a little bit below your plywood. So when you go to glue your fiberglass sheeting on, you don't have a bunch of screw heads sticking out. You want to make sure that's as thin as possible in there. So at this point, we have everything screwed back in. The floor is down. The inside's looking pretty good. I've got all my holes from my outlets all the way around the inside of the trailer. So guess what? Now it's time for electrical. And that's going to be part 3, I believe, next week's episode. We're going to talk everything electrical, and we're going to get down to business. I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank everybody for the questions they're asking in the comments. By the way, shout out to Bartman in Florida. He was the very first comment on my very first YouTube video. So I don't know. What do you think? Bartman, you ever up in the Smoky Mountains, come visit me. Hot dogs are on me anytime, brother. So keep the comments coming. If you have any questions, tell me how terrible I'm doing. Tell me how good I'm doing. That's all I got for this week. I'll see you next week. Peace out, Smoky Mountain Dogs.